This is the world of Pro Drag Superstars. My name is Phil Harper, track voice for Pro Drag Superstars, along with feature reporter Barbara Alexander and the king of drag racing, Big Daddy Don Garlits. From Killcare Dragway in Xenia, Ohio, it's a top fuel classic. Big Daddy Don Garlits will line up against the Greek, Karamesines, for a legendary match race. These two longtime rivals will fight it out in a best 2 out of 3 runs down the quarter mile. The small town of Xenia is a mirror to the past, and in its own right possesses the spirit that is the core of today's race. Also on the world of Pro Drag Superstars, you'll visit Los Angeles County Raceway to find an exiled brand of race car on the comeback, the Top Fuel Altered.
My thoughts is that they think that we're all guardrail bangers and our screws are loose.
Barbara takes us to Seattle to meet a top model who began her career at the track.
There are in every pageant girls who think they're going to win just because they get up there and they shake it or whatever.
And Don will help put our racing action in perspective.
The dirt just keeps flying off the tires and your wind light comes on. And Blackie's jumping up and down. He says, we won, we won. The Greek got off the track.
Stay with us as we follow the only car in the world to burn volatile nitromethane.
Brought to you in part by Lava. Lava with pumice powers extra dirty hands clean.
I've been working with my hands since I was a kid. I piled up lots of experience with hand cleaners, from soap to turpentine. The one I use is Lava, because Lava has the power of pumice. You can feel it, powering away dirt, powering your hands clean. I'm Roger Gustin. I built the Lava machine. Mister, when I talk power, I know what I'm talking about.
Lava powers hands clean.
On April 4th, 1974, the town of Xenia was struck by a killer tornado, devastating virtually everything in its path. The spirit that rebuilt their community is the same force that attracted the great names in professional drag racing to small towns and cities all over America. During the late 50s and through the 60s, the match race was a means by which people could see drag racing firsthand, experience and meet in person the automotive athletes that were before only names in newsprint. In the 80s, the sport has grown to mammoth proportions, but that early passion and esprit is still alive. Pro Drag Superstars recently witnessed such an event at the Los Angeles County Raceway. We asked Rod Hines about a racing machine that has remained frozen in the evolution of this sport.
Fuel altered, obviously it's got a earlier model body on it. Pre-48 is normally the rule. Funny cars are limited to 5 years from the date of manufacture to the current running year. So we're running bodies that are 35, 40 years old on the cars in most cases. Normally the wheelbases are also a lot shorter. The cars, as you can tell, it looks short the way they're built. They're normally about 120-inch wheelbase. The funny cars go out to 125, and some of our cars run that way, but not all of them anymore. Fuel altered really started out back in the late 40s when drag racing originated. They didn't have a funny car, so the boys with the roadsters who were running out and down the street and the fuel coupes, well, they were actually just gas coupes at the time. When they started to go that nitro in the tank is when they went and started to change the terminology a bit. They called them fuel roadsters and fuel coupes, and then they got to gas coupes, and they thought they needed another designation because they were letting the guys set the engine back in the chassis a little more, and so they just called the car an altered because it was changed so much. An altered 3 runs out of 10 goes straight normally, unless you've got a good set of horsepower in it and tires and everything is right. Funny cars go straight about 8 times out of 10. It's just an exciting ride is all you can say about an altered. They'll tell you the big difference is that you feel the speed in an open car such as an altered. In a funny car with a windshield in front, you don't feel the wind blowing in your face and trying to pull your goggles off or blow the visor back. I'm very prejudiced. I've seen cars leave the starting line all crossed up. The driver will save it and correct it. The other one went down to half track and got crossed up, and the guy in the other lane who was crossed up the starting line will nip the other guy in the lights. So it makes for very close racing.
Despite the safety concerns, fuel altereds are definitely a top people's choice at the track.
But they think that we're all guardrail bangers and our screws are loose. And Obviously, we've got another, this is the first race in 3 years. Obviously, they think there's something going on that ADRA, pardon me, and NHRA is a little bit interested in, because we might not go as quick and we might not go as fast, but they love to watch the Alderts run.
Hines was runner-up in the day's competition, bowing to Ron Beaverness with an amazing 6.89, 226.70 miles an hour. Whether you drive the fuel-altered, funny fuel car or top fuel dragster, the times and speeds are taken from the same racing surface. The track is 1,320 feet from start to finish, with an additional half-mile for deceleration, a safe shutdown. The cars begin their trip on a green light from the Christmas tree. An electronic beam is broken at the starting line, signaling the time clock to begin. At the finish line, there are 3 beams. The first is 66 feet before the finish line. It's used in calculating the miles per hour. The second beam is right at the finish line. Once crossed, it stops the time clocks, giving us the elapsed time it took to travel the quarter mile, the winner. The third beam is 66 feet after the finish line. Tripped, the beam acts as a speed trap, posting the car's speed in miles per hour. But it's the elapsed time, or the low ET, that the drivers work for. While the officials make a final check of the track and timing equipment, we can find out a little more about our 2 drivers. Yesterday, we caught up with Big Daddy Don Garlits and the Greek Chris Karamesines at the Killcare track office.
I think the first time we met was at sometime around that Great Bend race in '59.
Maybe before that in Cordova. We talked a little bit there, and then after that, a year later, I had my own top fuel car.
You outran us there, Malone and I, at Great Bend, and that got a lot of publicity. The tracks were really looking for people that they could match together, and the Tucson Speed Sport was way out in Arizona most of the time. Postolian, you couldn't hardly get him out to the tracks. And Cook and Bedwell, they had sold their car, and so that was just a natural for you and I to race.
Especially us around this area where there was more racetracks in the east and the south than there was in California.
Well, you know, it was something to have like 1,500 people show up at a match race in those days. And when you came down to the Golden Triangle to match race our car, in that 2 out of 3 match race, I'll never forget it. There was 4,500 people paid to get into that race. It was the largest crowd that track ever had when you came out of Chicago. It was like a shot heard around the world. Now, it's even a long time before Coletta became a racer. Coletta was just a kid kind of hanging around Postolian's car in the beginning, then he later got a gas dragster. But in other words, the Greek and I have been in the professional drag racing since professional drag racing got started. I mean, from the very start of it. In other words, I'm not sure, but I think that maybe my car was the first one that ever got paid to show up, because I document that as June 1958. They paid me to go to Wichita Falls, Texas. If anybody got paid before that, step up and give me the date, you know. And it wasn't very long after that you and I were match racing. It started off, they would hire us to come to races, like to go to Riverside.
Riverside, I think they paid us more then to go there than they do right now. I mean, that was some money back then.
Yes, sir.
I think they paid us like $2,500 to go to Riverside. And it was Don, myself, and I think they had east, west, south. They brought 5 or 6 cars.
They brought Langley, they brought the Postolian, who didn't show. They brought the Speed Sport Roadster. And that was a really, and all of these races generated tremendous amounts of spectators, so consequently all the strips wanted to get on the bandwagon. We just don't know how many times we've match raced, because it's literally been thousands of times.
There's so many racetracks back in the east, you know, that we've even forgot about. And through all them races is what, you know, got California interested in what we were doing, because we were actually running 20 miles an hour faster than they were. So they said, there's no way. It was somebody's house. I don't know if it was yours or where was it. We called and they said, you guys be here at Riverside in 2 weeks. You got that kind of money. So we went there and we ran like, I think their speed was 159 miles an hour. When we rolled off trailer, it was 180. So we made believers out of back then.
After this short message, we'll get set for round 1 of this Pro Drag Superstars Match Race Classic. Live the life of a glamorous calendar girl and survive a fiery crash in Chester, South Carolina. We're about ready to begin round one of this match race classic here on the World of Pro Drag Superstars. Garlits and Karamesines have been fine-tuning their motors personally. With these two drivers, that's standard procedure. So, while the crews button up the cars, we have some extremely rare vintage footage of a car fire that nearly took the life of one of our drivers here today. Earlier, Don Garlits and Chris Karamesines talked about their first face-to-face competition in Great Bend, Kansas. That was September 1959. Don Garlits had moved out of the driver's seat in a partnership with a guy by the name of Art Malone. The partnership was actually born out of a terrible fire that nearly took Big Daddy's life. The date? June 20th, 1959. Don's wife had insisted that day that he wear a leather coat for the first time to replace the customary drag racing t-shirt. 3/4 of the way down the track, the supercharger blew apart, tearing a terrible hole in the manifold. Don describes the flames as like a blowtorch. The burns were massive. His recovery was miraculous. But Big Daddy had decided to retire from the wheel and to crew on his own car. Retire until the Greeks' victory in Great Bend. Don Garlits' return wasn't immediate, but when he did, it started an incredible rivalry between these two drivers that lasted for over a quarter of a century. Chris Karamesines is the only man or woman to beat Big Daddy 23 straight match races. Neither Muldowney, Coletta, nor Prudo have come anywhere near that mark. We're ready to start racing. Big Daddy's crew chief is bringing the Swamp Rat, that's the name for the Garlits car, into the burnout area. The crew is actually pushing it into position at the tower lane. They'll switch lanes in the next run, but right now, I believe Garlits isn't too happy about a water spill in his lane. A local eliminator blew a water pump, sprayed water all over his lane earlier today. Both Garlits and Karamesines stipulated that before they would run this match race, the track had to be in top condition. And last night, track officials scrubbed the entire track with laundry detergent, and then they prepped it. It's kind of a sticky spray they use. It's called Dynabite. Both of these cars have just come from national events, and they're set to run hard. Dave Cummings, most people around the track know him only at Pork Chop. Dave Cummings is lining up Chris Karamesines' car. Drivers have started their engines, and they're about ready to do their burnouts. Let's watch. I should mention this track has a fine surface, but a very limited shutdown area.
This is a very old drag strip, and there's a creek down at the end that nothing can be done with it. Of course, in the days when the cars were going 160 miles an hour, it was just fine. But at 260, it's a whole different ball of wax.
Both cars are pulling up to the staging lights. Currently, Karamesines is in the top 3 in the ADRA World Championship Series. Garlits is the second driver ever to hit 260 miles an hour. They're off the line. Garlits is pulling away. Karamesines just doesn't seem to have the power. It's Big Daddy Don Garlits in round one. 5.96, 219.51 miles an hour. We'll talk to our two drivers back in the pits, but until they get there, let's go to Barbara Alexander, who talked earlier with Heidi Gardner. She's a motorsports English leather calendar girl from last year's World Finals.
I won the pageant there, and I got to go to Las Vegas and competed against 50 other girls from all over the nation who had been in similar pageants. And they picked one cover girl and 12 calendar girls, and I represent the month of December.
Gosh, what was it like to be in a beauty pageant in Las Vegas?
It was really exciting and a lot of work.
Would you say this whole experience has lived up to your expectations?
Yeah, it's been really a lot of excitement. I've been called several times to do just local things, and I'm also in a real small part in a movie that's premiering this January called Black Moon Rising.
You were photographed for a poster with the car. That was used, is that right?
It's the Black Moon promotional poster. It's with the car and 2 of the other calendar girls. And Dick Zimmerman shot it. He's a real good photographer out of Hollywood, and we had makeup men, and it was just really exciting.
What would you say out of the past year is the one experience that you always remember?
The movie scene. We filmed all night long from 10 at night till 10 the next morning. No sleep, no food, nothing to drink except watered down Coke.
Real glamorous.
Yeah, and it's definitely, acting is definitely not all it's cracked up to be. You work for what you earn.
Would you say this is like a Cinderella story? How has this changed your life?
Not so much changed my life, it's just changed my attitudes on a lot of things. Before I did it, I was just working, and that's all I did was day to day go to work, come home, you know, whatever, make the payments, the bills. This way I'm getting to do a lot more things that most people wouldn't get to do. I feel lucky in that way.
Heidi, you're a small town girl, aren't you? How did your mother feel about you going to Las Vegas for a beauty pageant?
She was excited. She didn't think I'd win. She kept me, oh, you're not going to win. I think she just didn't want me to get my hopes up. But then when I did, she was real happy for me.
Mothers are like that.
Yeah.
There's so much talk today about women being exploited in beauty contests. But here you've told us how much you've gotten out of the experience. How would you answer somebody if they came up to you and said that?
I think it only exploits you if you let yourself be exploited. There are in every pageant girls who think they're going to win just because they get up there and they shake it or whatever, lots of TNA, but it's definitely not like that. It goes a lot by personality, by how you present yourself. More than anything, if you want to be exploited, you will be exploited. But if you hold yourself in a manner where people are going to respect you for what you're doing, then it isn't like that at all.
For being 22, you really have your act together. Has this kind of experience helped you grow up a lot?
Oh yeah, definitely, because you're on your own. There's, nobody there to help you when you're in Las Vegas. You're with, well, I was lucky I had Carla with me, but you go down there, you're by yourself. You can't fall back on anybody. If something goes wrong, you have to depend on yourself to fix it and make it right. And it has a lot to do with mental attitude, too, about, what you want to do. It's more or less you just do it or you don't get to do it at all.
Heidi started a bright career, but still has her feet on the ground, and sometimes back at the track.
I think the speed, how fast they go faster every year. It's like every year something happens where they design something new or they can go faster and faster, and it's like every year they want to go faster, and they always do.
Let's go down to the pits. We're ready to hear from Chris Karamesines.
The car ran pretty decent. We just underestimated the track. There's a little more bite out there than I thought. But I think this next round we'll hop it up a little bit and make a few changes. I think we'll be in good shape. There's a possibility that we might throw the Firestones on, but we're going to wait and see. We're going to make that decision in the next 10 minutes. It seemed like one of the tires was shaking too bad for us, and I didn't want to take a chance, but we'll try to rebalance it and see if we can't get that out of it. The motor was a little on the rich side, but I think we tune it up a little. She should run a lot better this next run.
Don Garlits is going to talk with us. Let's go back to the pits.
Well, it ran pretty good, It wasn't what we really would have liked for it to run, but it was acceptable for the first run on this racetrack. We haven't been here since 1974. We're going to lean it a little bit and make it have a little more horsepower. I hope it don't spin the tires. It did spin a little bit that time. I got my new computer deal that gives me the relative altitude, and we're real high. We're about 3,000 feet today.
Right after this commercial message, we'll start round 2 of this best 2 out of 3 match race classic here on the World of Pro Drag Superstars. It's time for round 2 here on the World of Pro Drag Superstars. While the crews wheel the top fuel dragsters into position, we have a moment to hear a story told by Big Daddy Don Garlits about a match race between Chris Karamesines and Don the Snake Prudhomme.
In those days, the dragsters held precedent over everything. The minute the 2 dragsters pulled up through the staging lines, the track just cleared the track, got all the stalkers out of the way, because we were the kings, and we ran when we wanted to. The Greek is going down the track, and he gets off the track, and he's actually in the dirt completely. And everybody's, they think he's crashing, right? Just screaming and hollering. The fans are just hooting and hollering. But the dirt just keeps flying off the tires, and your wind light comes on. And Blackie's jumping up and down. He says, we won, we won. The Greek got off the track. And the promoter of the race that was running, he says, oh, no. He says, you didn't win. He says, this is a match race. If the Greek wants to drive in the dirt, that's his choice. He got there first.
This go-around, Chris Karamesines is in the tower lane. Every driver in professional racing seems to have his or her own ritual prior to climbing into their machine. Garlits always takes an inspection tour of the track. Karamesines, he just sort of takes a casual 9-to-5 approach. The drivers are getting into their cars now. We'll be in the shutdown area after this race. If Karamesines wins this heat, these 2 longtime rivals will be 1-1 for the day. Each of these superstars have very strong feelings about the people who come to watch them race.
At first, we were doing it because we enjoyed the sport. We still enjoy the sport, but we were working hard to be #1. And then through that, you meet people. And every city you go to, you got friends there. If anyone knows Chris Karamesines or Don Garlits, they want to come out and see him. They actually feel good. And they says, well, that's a great race. Win or lose.
Oh, from the looks of the burnouts, both teams are out to win. Big Daddy also holds his followers in high esteem.
The fans is why I'm still racing. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be racing. I'd be down in my museum. Because racing is hard work. And anybody that watches us in the pits and see what we go through between rounds knows that it's not an easy task. But when you go out there and you pull out on the drag strip and everybody stands up and screams and hollers and claps, it's all worth it. And so I have to say that the fans are the reason that I'm still out there.
The staging lights are set. Karamesines has Garlits off the line. He'll have to push it to catch up. Garlits takes the Greek at the finish line. Big Daddy Don Garlits, 6.04. A very fast 255.68 miles an hour. That's less than 10 miles an hour off the world record that Garlits himself holds. Well, both drivers knew the risk involved because of the track's short shutdown area, but Garlits still pushed it to the limit. Let's go down to the shutdown area and see if we can get a few comments from Don Garlits.
Well, you know, it's just a Sunday afternoon match race. It always feels good to win, especially beating the Greek. You know, he's, like I say, he's a legend. We've been racing forever. It was close, you know. It was a very close run. I saw the car, the front wheels the whole time. Come on over here, Greek.
Nice race, very good.
Yeah, real good race. You know,
I had the opportunity to ask Don Garlits a question earlier about his longevity in this sport, and if he ever thought he'd continue to dominate his competition as long as he has.
We always figured that like each year was the last year of it, didn't you? You know, we'd make the loop and the strip, well, they'll never have us back again.
That's right.
And then
Year after
we were thinking that in 1960.
This is Phil Harper for Barbara Alexander and all of us here in Xenia, Ohio. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.